Hello and welcome once again to the Dead Ink Books podcast. Today we've got a little bite-sized miniature episode for you, a half-hour interview that will slot neatly into your lunch break or commute. Recently I read the book Mary and the Rabbit Dream by Noémi Kiss-Deáki, published by Gallibegger, and I was absolutely blown away by the way it brought a really weird corner of British history into the light, something which at first sounds so surreal and dreamlike, but in the telling of the story turns out to be a fascinating lens through which to view the social inequalities faced by working class women in 18th century England. It's a great book that combines rigorously researched historical veracity with a contemporary political sensibility and a real feeling for the poetry and tragedy of the story that elevates it beyond polemic into something with the kind of dark, disturbing beauty that reminded me of a book like Patrick Susskind's Perfume or The Glutton by A.K. Blakemore. We've selected Mary and the Rabbit Dream to be our book club pick for this month. So if you're listening to this when it goes out in April 2025, you can pick up a copy of the book from our shop on Smithdown Road or online at deadinkbookshop.com, alongside a ticket for the book club discussion, which, like all of our book clubs, is held on the last day of the month.
Thank you very much for joining us here on the podcast today, Noémi. And the first question is one that I often ask debut novelists before we get into the sort of the meat of the book itself. I'd just like to ask, what's been your kind of career or life path towards writing your first novel?
Well, yeah, my life so far hasn't really been about book writing at all. Like not career-wise. I've been studying and working as a librarian, and then I changed career paths. I started working as a transcriptionist, and the last couple of years I have been working in medical transcription as a medical secretary. And in all this, I also became a parent 7 years ago. So it was not completely. It wasn't obvious for me that I would write a novel. It has always been a dream. I wrote a lot before becoming a parent, but then I felt like a dream sort of got lost in in the life I had. And then 2 years ago, I suddenly had just a very, almost like a compulsion. I felt like I had this built up restless energy that I realized that the only way I could get it out was to start writing again. And that's what I did. And I wrote and wrote for almost a whole year. Lots of stories, finished all of them. And one of the projects there was Mary and the Rabbit Dream. And then I had the extreme, I started to send things out, trying to get things published. And I had the extreme luck to suddenly find a small British press who just jumped on one of my manuscripts and really wanted to publish it. So, yeah, it has been really unbelievable and unexpected. I never thought it would happen so quickly, and that it suddenly would be a novel out in the world.
That's really interesting that you say you were a transcriber. For a couple of years, I worked in transcription and subtitling, and you do find yourself becoming very interested and drawn into whatever subject it is you're transcribing, because there's just so many thousands of words filtering through you on that subject. So was there something about, did you feel you were kind of like medically immersed in sort of medical jargon, and did that sort of help with the interest in the Mary Toft case?
Yes, it actually did, because by the time I started to read more about Mary Toft, and I found the pamphlets the medical pamphlets about the case, I was already very. Then I had been working as a secretary for a couple of years, medical secretary. So it was very interesting for me to sort of compare the medical language of the 18th century and the medical lens on a patient with today's lens. So I think it's a very, very interesting type of language that is used, and a type of lens that is used on a human. So it was definitely something that already was very interesting to me, and it was sort of combined in this when I read about this case, and um, it was also what made me wanting to use some of the language from the pamphlets in the novel itself. I have these quotes, and I also have a lot of allusions to the texts, and I use them in different ways in the language of the novel itself. Yeah, that was a great. Yeah.
Smashing. Thank you. Before we get into the novel too much, for anyone who's listening who's not aware, could you just give us a quick summary of the story of Mary Toft that's at the heart of the novel?
Yes, so there's this weird story from 1726 in England, where there was a poor woman who suddenly started to give birth to rabbits, according to newspaper articles. And this became huge news and spread all over the country, and lots of people got involved. And in the end, even the royal house and the royal physicians got involved. Uh, and after a while, it was all exposed as a hoax. And Mary Toft was the woman in the midst of this, and she was the one who people thought was giving birth to rabbits.
Smashing. It's an absolutely sort of thrilling book. The way it's written is very compulsive and compelling in the kind of in the short paragraphs, and the kind of the way sort of certain repetitions in the prose really drive home certain points. It's a very kind of detailed account of what happens, and it feels very, very accurate to the period. And I wondered, how much research did you do into the case itself, but also into the kind of historical era that it was set in?
Yes, well, my absolutely main source of information and inspiration was Karen Harvey's book, The Impostor's Rabbit Breeder, Mary Toft and 18th Century England. And that's what really got me really interested in the case, because she is the first researcher to really delve into the economical background of Mary Toft and the town she lives in, and also the whole unequal society of the time. So she really has all these comparisons between prices and also the status of rabbits in that era and how expensive they were. So that was really my main source of information and what really got me interested. And she has also a couple of conclusions and speculations about the case that made me really wanting to write a historical fiction that would be inspired by this research. Um, and then my other main source of information was the pamphlets themselves that were written by these three doctors who were the most involved in the case. And they're also very, very detailed. So you can read about, for example, Mary Toft is held captive in a so-called barnyard in London, a sort of bathhouse. Um, and in there she is served food, and they are really writing down like everything she gets for food, or which day something happened, or if it was a Wednesday, and which time of the day. You have the if it was 2 o'clock in the night, it's written down. So it's very, very detailed notes about her days there. Um, and it's also a very short period of time that this happens, and it's a couple of months. So it was a very interesting um, uh, event to write about, because there are so many detailed descriptions from the people themselves who were involved. So yeah, that's where I got most of my information. But for the broader picture and the society, it was Karen Harvey's research that was my biggest source.
So what did you feel translating this story into the medium of a novel would bring to it, or would do differently to that information in the kind of non-fictional realm?
Well, one of it is to just really get into, like, give these people personalities, like what their motivations are, what they're thinking, why they would act in a certain way. Um, it was also imagining the reality behind a certain. Sometimes I quote something from the pamphlet and then I write, but in reality, this is what happened, or he wrote this, but this is what he thought really. So those are the little things you can do if you fictionalize. And then also one thing which was important for me was to just be able to pass judgment on all the things that are happening, because uh, if you read about it and read research about it, it's very clear it's a very extremely unequal society. And as I started writing about it, I realized I could really just um, pass judgment on it and give my opinion on it, and sometimes in a very critical way, sometimes as dark humor, and sometimes in a satirical way. Um, so yeah, that's I felt that was my freedom to fill these facts with opinions, and sometimes it could be anachronistic because we have um, as people today we have one perspective. So, but I felt I could lean into all that, and look at all this in with modern eyes and modern sensibilities.
Smashing. That's really interesting, and it reminds me of other examples of sort of historical fiction that's kind of viewed from a modern lens where characters who at the time were shielded by social respect can be presented as kind of as truly villainous as they are. So it put me in mind of things like Ben Meyer's The Gallows Pole or Werner Herzog's film about Caspar Hauser, which is a real favorite of mine. Um, and that kind of polemical viewpoint, that kind of strong political consciousness, that's threaded really effectively throughout the novel. And like you say, with the kind of humanity brought to the characters, it really gives it like a drive and a propulsiveness. And I wondered, because it's such a poetic idea and poetic story of the rabbit dream, that then the more you look into it, kind of gives way to all of this inequality and class issues. I wondered if there was one of those things that attracted you first. Did you think, right, I want to write a book about this fantastical scenario and what the truth of it could be, or were you kind of in, and then the inequality was something that became apparent and angered you afterwards, or was that something you went into it? This is the scales I've got to rebalance as I'm telling this story.
It was absolutely there from the start, because um, my whole interest uh, began with reading Karen Harvey's research and book about Mary Toft. And there, one of the main things she highlights is this extreme inequality. So it was really impossible to engage with this story without that knowledge. I think even if I wouldn't have read anything about it, but maybe only Mary Toft's Confessions, there is a small part there where she says that they ask her about how the rabbit birth started, and she describes an event where she was working in the fields with her fellow women, and they saw rabbits. And she says that she was very poor, so she couldn't afford rabbits, so she tried to catch it. And even with that little mention, it's there that this is something she can't afford. She tries to catch it, to to be able to eat it. Um, so for me, it's an unescapable aspect of the story. And also when you start to think about the case, how extreme it is, how bizarre, um, you realize that this is something that only very, very desperate people could come up with. So for me, there is no way to engage with this story or write about it without having class and inequality as a part of it, and
Yeah.
being
I,
acutely aware of it. Yeah.
I thought that was probably the case, but there was one character that kind of made me want to ask, and it's Nathaniel Saint Andre, who is so kind of willfully blind to the reality of the situation, so kind of desperate to believe in the kind of beauty and the uniqueness and the unusualness um, of this scenario. And I
As
feel like,
absurd as that sounds, yeah.
yeah, as mad as it sounds, but I feel like he emerges from the book with a slightly better reputation than some of the other men. There's like a little bit of sympathy towards his viewpoint, maybe as his kind of as the sort of hapless romantic to some extent.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say he emerges in the book because he is the one who really has his reputation destroyed. But I think you mean probably to the readers, he
Yeah,
emerges
sorry.
as a
Obviously, his
yeah,
reputation
yeah, yeah,
in the real world is trash, but I mean, as a reader,
yeah,
I was slightly less antagonized by him than some of the other men.
yeah. That wasn't really intentional at all. It came from how I think it started with reading. I read his pamphlet, and I looked at these contemporary illustrations of him. There's one very famous one by Hogarth, where he stands in a room in the barnyard where Mary Toft is giving birth to rabbits, and he stands almost in the middle of the room, and with this very graceful step forwards because he was a dancing master. So the artist wanted to highlight that he's very elegant and looks quite different from the others. Also, very just like what is he doing? He looks like a dancing master, almost dancing. And then there's a description where Karen Harvey describes in her book about the first time he is present at a so-called rabbit birth, and he goes home and starts writing his pamphlet, and she just has this short little note that, well, this is a man who certainly seemed to believe that he had witnessed that this was real, that he has witnessed something real, and we can't know for sure, but it's also the impression you get from his pamphlet that he really believes this and he tries to prove it scientifically why this is the case, that this is something that's actually happening. And then I came across an anecdote from much later where he is invited to a dinner as an old man, and the dinner the host, he makes sure to not serve rabbits out of respect for Saint Andre because he can't eat rabbits since this case. And those are just those little details. I realized that somehow made him endearing. I just there's just something there. It's because it's so absurd, even for his own age and era, and the belief systems at the time. It is absurd to believe this, and he really does. And then also this really poor timing where his pamphlet is published the same week that the case is exposed as a hoax. This is no spoiler, by the way. I'm really getting into it early in the book, so the reader will know how everything unfolds. But there are so many things that are just so um, funny and chaotic, and yeah, you just get the sense that he was a very interesting, strange, impulsive character. And yeah, it sort of came as I read about him and wrote, and he started to live as a character in the novel. It's sort of these little things um, got in there. So yeah, in the end, I also, when I myself read back, I realized that yeah, actually he is a little more. Um, you feel a little more sympathetic towards him as the other people. Although I try to get into the other people too, like their humanity and what might make them act the way they do. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he'd had a lot more kind of endearing qualities on top of the others. But moving away from the politics of the book a little bit, I wanted to ask you about the style of the writing because it's written in a very kind of unique way. I wondered, did that come along later in the drafting process, or are there any specific influences on that? How did the kind of very emphatic short paragraphs that are sustained throughout the book, how did that come about?
It was really there from the beginning. I wrote this in a very, very short period of time, and it was a very intense, almost bubble that I was in as I wrote. And the style, I would say, um, comes from. I worked on a project before this book, and I have one very um, a favorite writer, a Swedish writer, Per-Olof Enquist. I think in English he's most known for his historical novel, The Royal Physician's Visit. It was translated in the 90s, and I also think it won a lot of awards. And he has also written many other books, and he usually has a sort of um, ironic tone, and he also uses repetitions. And when I worked on a previous project, I wanted to write it in a style that would be an homage to his style. And then it sort of took off and became its own thing. And I really enjoyed experimenting with it. So by the time I started to work on Meritoft, it was really, uh, I felt I had come into a kind of style that I really liked and that I felt that really worked. So it was very effortless. It almost felt like improvisation. So a lot of the sort of rhymes in the book, and they really just they came as I wrote them. There was no thought behind it. It was almost like composing music. It's like the melodies come by themselves, and when you're done, you can hear it, and you feel it's a clear melody. Uh, so yeah, so it was really the style was really in place, and I felt very comfortable and at home in it by the time I started to write Meritoft, and it was there from beginning to end.
Smashing. And you ended up getting it published by Galley Beggar, who have just been publishing sort of fantastic book after fantastic book for the last, well, however many years, but also specifically the last couple of months. I've loved their recent books by Alex Phoebe and Mark Bowles. So it's got to the point where new Galley Beggar things are a kind of instant, oh, okay. And this was so kind of suited to my tastes and my interests that I ended up kind of reading it in no time at all. And as I mentioned in the email, ended up then reading it out loud in part to my partner who
Oh yeah, I love that. Yeah.
but she ended up
Yeah.
she got impatient and she finished it under her own steam after that. Um, but it's I've lent the book to a couple of people and it feels as if it's a very timely book. It's a very kind of it's got a lot of kind of contemporary relevance to it. And it's I've had it, nobody said, why have you lent me this weird book? Everyone's been kind of like super excited by it. And I just wondered how have you found the reception to the book? Have you had any interest in feedback?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was really shocked because when I sent the manuscript out initially, um, I had already been trying to publish other things. I had managed to publish one short story uh, back then, and then but also I had gotten a lot of rejections. So then I was really unsure, like, is this working? And also because English is my third language, so I was also starting to think that maybe something doesn't work in the way I use the language. Maybe you do need to have English as your first language if you want to get published, and so on. So I was really had a lot of doubts, and I thought that, well, we'll see. Maybe we'll see for how long I'll try. Maybe I will give this a couple of years, and then if it doesn't work, I will stop. So when Gary Beggar wanted, that was the first very positive shock. Like, oh, they really like it. They want it. And then when they published it, and lots of people read it, and there were a lot of also other authors who read it during the pre-publication process and had lots of very nice things to say about it. So I have felt just really, really overwhelmed by how many people really appreciate it and like it and sort of get it, like that they enjoy the style, they enjoy the humor, they enjoy the anger and so on. Because I really thought that, well, if anyone likes this, it's maybe will be very few people who likes this my weird type of language or something like that, or my weird humor or something like that. I never thought it would be so very well received and um, yeah, gain so many enthusiastic readers. So that has been very, very, very nice. Yeah, and it's very funny when you think you create something and you know it's maybe a little weird and strange, and then people end up liking it. It's a very very good feeling. You feel very seen as an artist. Yeah.
Kind of sort of validated in your pursuits.
Yes, yes, because yeah, then you think, yeah, well, maybe there is a point in yeah, trying to publish things because I think I would write anyway, but yeah, yeah.
So has that process of writing, is that continuing? Are you working on a new novel or anything else at the moment?
Well, actually, not right now. I wrote a novella last year, but I really, really slowed down after that year. Uh, but I wrote so much that year, so I have still have three other novels that I'm revisiting and seeking to publish, and also short stories. So right now I'm going back to older things a lot, uh, and I hope I will have a new uh, writing period. But right now I feel it has really calmed down, and also there have been lots of other events in my life that have made it difficult to write. So I'm having a creative break, I think,
Well, it's
and we'll
a
see.
well-deserved rest after writing that book.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, because it was very, very. Now I say it was a wonderful year of writing, but being in it was very exhausting because it was really I had an idea and I really had to finish it, and I stayed up late, and so in the long run it becomes unsustainable. So yeah.
We've actually selected the book for we do a book club in the shop. So once a month we have about sort of 10 to 15 people that come on a Sunday to discuss a book that's always a kind of recently published from an independent press. So I wondered, do you have any particular message that you would like those people to go into that book with?
Oh, um, well, well, that was difficult without like spoiling anything, I think. Um, which perhaps ideas about um, um, fairness um, and justice and what is that and what happens when people try to act like that and the convictions of being good and being just and doing the right thing and how does that work out in real life, um, especially in certain circumstances and yeah,
Smashing. So
something like that.
these,
Yeah.
before I let you go, these other books that you're working on or having a break from working on, rather, I should say, um, do they share any kind of commonalities with Mary and the Rabbit Dream? Are you a committed author of historical fiction or of political fiction or of feminist fiction? Is there anything we should be expecting?
Well, I have one other book that is very, I should say, very like Miranda Rabbit Dream, but much bigger. Um, that's definitely like a sibling book, I would say. And then the two others are also more historically speculative and also political. Uh, yeah, it's sort of unescapable to have politics and feminism in it somehow. Uh, yeah, so I would say there will be similar things, um, themes, and yeah, we could accept something similar or in the same world.
Smashing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for answering all those questions, Naomi. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Like I say, the novel is absolutely fantastic. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Can't wait to hear what people at Book Club have got to say about it. And if you're listening to this, it's available on our website, deadinkbookshop.com, or in the bookshop on Smithdown Road. So yeah, it just remains to once again thank you for your time, Noémi. Thank you very much indeed, and look forward to reading whatever comes next from you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really nice to to talk. Yeah,
Cheers.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.